ahead and start, and I'm sure people will continue drifting in. We had fun yesterday, and I hope that you will forgive us for our talks yesterday, and that we'll forgive each other, and that all is forgiven. And we're ready to move on to a new topic today, which is interconnectedness. And we have explored the idea of interconnectedness in many ways in the speeches that have been given, but I thought we would put it on a more down-to-earth level. So I'm glad you're sitting close so that we can have some conversation again. First of all, recently we had Amit Goswami speak to us at our summer conference. And if you remember, he's the one that was in the movie What the Bleep Do We Know? And where he was trying to give a lot of practical information about how consciousness affects us and how consciousness is the one universal field. And he particularly called it non-local consciousness. In other words, consciousness, we may have it anchored in our minds, but it is non-local. It connects universally, and it can impact things all over in not distance related. And as Dara mentioned, the information about the remote viewing that has become popular. In fact, the United States had that as part of their spy missions. They had a remote viewing project up until the 90s, and then it was made public, and then they said they had closed it down because they didn't want to be identified with something hooey, you know. But actually, they probably reopened it under a different name because non-local viewing is a skill that people can develop. And it relates to this idea of non-local consciousness. There's a theory that has been proven in quantum physics that a particle, if two particles are together and you separate them, if you affect the spin of one, it affects the spin of the other simultaneously. So what is it that's connecting them over that space, even faster than the speed of light? There's something that connects us all in this field of being. And Ervin Laszlo, who was also mentioned, I believe, in Dara's talk, but wrote about the Akashic field. He called it the Akashic field. And we're familiar with the idea of Akasha from the Secret Doctrine. And this Akasha is like this cosmic web of consciousness in which we live and move and have our being. Its characteristic is sound, like the logos, the creative sound or word that penetrated through all of creation. And it also relates to Rupert Sheldrake, who has written books as mundane as Animals Who Know When Their Masters Are Coming Home, because he did all kinds of experiments. He's a member of the Theosophical Society from England, and he has he's a genius in creating experiments that can be verified and that scientists cannot question or criticize his methodology, that can prove such things as animals who know when their masters are coming home, that it's not the sound of the car or anything else, but they had an animal waiting at home, and they had the camera with a timer on it. And then the minute the master decided to turn to go home, they looked at the watch, and that was the exact minute that the animal that had been sleeping all day got up and goes to the door and starts waiting for the master to come home. So it is definitely a non-local consciousness that connects all of us. An example from Indian mythology that I really love, because it's a poetic kind of thing, is Indra's net. That Indra was a little bit lazy, and he was, in his mountain palace, but he wanted to know what was going on everywhere. And so he put this vast net over the entire world, and at each conjunction of the net, and there are different stories. There are two versions. One, he put a reflective jewel, or like a dewdrop, that when anything happened, anywhere in the world, the image would be reflected everywhere else, and he could keep an eye on everything that was going on. And there's another version that I really like too, because sound is the quality that's related to the Akashic record. And that is that there was a little set of bells on each conjunction of the net. And that every time one bell was disturbed anywhere, all the rest of the bells would resonate to that sound, and he would know what was going on. But those are poetic ways of looking at the fact that we are all interconnected, and that everything we think projects outward. Everything we do has impact all over, and it has ripples. As one of the speakers said, if you throw a stone, I think it was Dara, if you throw a stone into the water, ultimately every molecule of that water will be impacted, and that is the way we are as a human race and people on this planet. So there's no question that we're interconnected, but we have to bring that into our lives and start thinking about how does that impact us, and how do we experience that interconnectedness. So let's see if I had anything else I wanted to say before I let Tim get the mic. If he gets the mic,
it's all over.
It's all over. Yeah, I think that's a good start. And the other one that everybody knows is photons, and that might behave as waves or particles, and that it is consciousness that seems to impact whether they behave as a wave or a particle. So that again, it's this ground of consciousness, whatever we want to call it, it's this cosmic net of consciousness that we live in. And Tim had a particular experience with relating to that idea, so I'm going to let Tim have the mic.
And today I actually have a mic. Just listening to Betty just now, it always is something that's rather interesting and curious to me when we put so much stock in quoting recent scientific revelations or discoveries about things that probably to most of us we would throw into that category of general common sense. Such things as when animals know when their masters come home. I mean, we've all experienced that. I mean, I know in my own home, it happens with me. You know, when my wife is coming home, somehow I didn't know it was a matter of consciousness, but I know it's time for me to start getting dinner ready. And, well, right, that's the animal part of me, perhaps. But, also I can think, before I ever was acquainted with the Theosophical Society, or theosophy. And probably many of you could claim a similar experience. Any teenager who has been in love, or convinced themselves that they're in love at least, will have the experience that at a certain point, you may be sitting alone by yourself, and suddenly you become aware of some sort of feeling that comes over you, and you don't really know why. You may feel sad, you may feel happy for no particular reason. And then in a phone call later on in the day, with that one that you love, you find that, surprisingly, at whatever that moment was, they were having this experience that caused them sadness, or that caused them happiness and joy. Now, that's, I say, common knowledge, but as with most common knowledge, it's really based in intuitive perception. But that's the sort of thing that I talk about. I often feel that one of the responsibilities for each one of us is, in a sense, to reclaim for ourselves our natural sort of perception. It's nice to have it confirmed, whether scientifically or theosophically. But the truth of the matter is that we all have experiences that are undeniable. And that's really the basis for the way we interact with the world. In talking with Betty about what I might be able to contribute to today's program, initially we had talked, and I had thought to share a certain story about an incident that had occurred with me, which was one of these very transformative experiences that the problem with it is that it was so deeply transformative for me that often when I find myself in a position of trying to talk about it, I come up short when it comes to the words. I remember mentioning to Joy Mills about this one time, and she talked about metempsychosis. You know, we encounter that word in the, I think it's the third fundamental proposition. But the idea that in our own sort of unfoldment, there are times when, for whatever reason, somehow or another, things shift in the way that we perceive the world and ourselves. It may be something that we have intentionally sort of sought, and then for some reason it comes, or it may be some sort of act of grace, you might even say, where unexpected, unsought something happens. Well, anyway, this was the nature of that particular experience, which changed my point of view utterly. But I thought, rather than talk about that, I could talk about something that is a little bit more immediate in time, and probably a little bit more immediate to the eternal city of Rome. Because just yesterday, I'm not staying here at the hotel. Betty said she sees enough of me in Chicago, I have to go elsewhere. Which is not true, by the way. But no, I'm staying in a lovely area in Rome called Trastevere. But yesterday, coming back, it was myself, my wife, Adele, and Joni. And we stopped in at Santa Maria Church. Beautiful church. And I had stopped in there before, but it just so happens that yesterday they were having their services. And you become aware of it before you step in the door because the frankincense, the incense is coming out through the door. So we walked in, and it was in the middle of the service. And the church is beautiful. I mean, mosaics, just the most gorgeous mosaics all over the walls, the floors. But the thing that impressed me the most was that immediately, upon setting foot inside, stepping into the midst of a Catholic service, which I am not Catholic, in a language which I don't understand. I do understand ciao bella, grazie, and cappuccino. But the rest of the matters, which unfortunately the priest did not talk about cappuccino during the service, but understanding nothing of the language. The experience was one of a immediate and deep sort of quiet in that space. 200, 300 people, and it was quiet. And there was also this sense of a palpable presence. And I guess depending on your religious background or your way of seeing the world, you might put different sorts of names on what that presence is. It might have been the presence of Jesus for the Catholic. It might have been a lot of different descriptors. But the experience was one of a stillness, a quiet, a sense of a certain sort of peace. And it wasn't a sense of being in the presence of 250 or 300 people. The individuality of each one there had somehow become, to some degree, merged into something else. You know, it's something that we all experience from time to time. Probably one of the beauties of the theosophical approach to coming together is that it is based on this idea that interconnectedness and the harmony that engenders that sense of interconnectedness is a possibility. And the way that we're able to enter into that can happen in various ways. As I said, I'm often impressed by the fact that in many ways, the approach to this interconnectedness that is most appealing to many is the approach of analyzing or reasoning our way into it. And that's an effective approach. You know, it's of the school of Jnana Yoga. And while it is a valid approach, it is not the only one. Because probably all of us are aware of people who have very deep perception and experience of interconnectedness, who arrive at it through giving themselves over completely to the experience of beauty, to the love of the divine, or to just some sort of quiet sense of present awareness. Krishna's advice, and I think he might be deemed a rather good advisor, and in this case, we're talking about the other Krishna. Not to say anything badly about you now. There is another one, though. But Krishna's advice was that by whatever path we approach him, by that same path does he meet us. There's the path of beauty, there's the path of knowledge, there's the path of devotion, there's the path of stillness, path of service. All are equal. So anyway, I thought that just in terms of today's story that I might share with you, that since we are in Rome, and since at that moment we were doing as the Romans do on Sunday, that I would share a story about Santa Maria Church.
Okay. I love that story. Tim's full of good stories.
Some are even true.
Some are true. And that reminds me of the fact that when we make contact, speaking of the theosophical connection, when we make contact with each other, we become like those two particles that have been together, and then if you affect one, you affect the other, no matter how far apart. And I have found this to be true in my theosophical life. As I have come to meetings and connected with people, then forever there is like this little bit of thread of connection, and we can always, whenever we contact each other again, it's always there, and it's as if we feel that connection of other theosophists everywhere. And it's a network, it's a silver network of connection that supports us in our spiritual lives, always. And I think that that's something we particularly come to this conference to be able to do. And when we can build it on an international basis, that is a web of light, or whatever you would call it, that can help build peace in the world, because we have this little tiny, thin, as it may be, thin blanket of light connection over the world. So what I want to do is give us a chance to build a little bit of that connection. And we're going to have people talk to your neighbor. And we're going to ask that you talk to somebody who's not your best friend or that you don't know real well, so that you will be able to meet somebody that you really didn't know before. And to talk to them about, we have a few things as far as what brought me to Theosophy. All of us have a story about that. And then what brought me to this conference, what brought me here. And as you work through this, the more you talk, the more you're going to realize that you're connected with the person you're talking to, even though you have not known them before. So what I'm going to do now is let you just turn to somebody that you have not talked with much before, and explore those questions. What brought you to Theosophy, and what brought you to this conference? Okay, are you having fun? Yeah, they've got it on now. Hello? Hello?
All right, I think it's time now. There is always a problem with letting the genie get out of the bottle. With you Theosophists, once we start talking and once we start eating, it's hard to stop. So for the moment.
I think you can see the degree. Have I got the mic? Okay. I think you can see the degree to which we are interconnected. And as you talk this way, and you are from other countries, from different countries, you may have different languages and have to communicate more carefully, but you make a connection. And you know that that person that you've been talking with, somehow when you see them passing in the hall and when we're eating, as we always seem to do, that you'll feel a special connection with them again. And then that connection will always be there. And you might not see them until another World Congress, but when you see them, you'll say, oh yes, how have you been doing? So this connection builds and grows, and it is a very important interconnection. And I hope that you will take this, as Tim said, letting the genie out of the bottle, but take this also with you as you go through the rest of the conference, and just take yourself to somebody you don't know and meet them and talk with them and find out something about them, because then you will have made that connection. And that's a part of building world peace. When people ask what we can do as a Theosophical Society for the world, I think our interconnections all through all cultures is one of the main things that we can do. So, do you have any comments you would like to make about your experience? Here, we've got one right here.
That was quick.
I would like to share a situation that happened. First of all, I'd like to start the story. In 1997, my childhood friend and I went to
Keep it close to you.
Went to the British Isles, and our last stop was England, and the rest of the people on the tour went that way, and me and my friend went that way. So we come upon an old church which said antique show. So we walked down the stairs, and it was huge inside, And there was huge tables with postcards. Well, my friend collected them. So she's looking through this area of postcards, and I went over here to England and to Bradford, where my grandmother is from. And so I'm searching through these postcards, and I said to myself, wouldn't it be wonderful? And I turned over this postcard, and it said Crowther, the Crowther sisters. And that was the maiden name of my grandmother. But what I'm getting at is the social. The other night, I began a conversation with this beautiful woman from England, and I proceeded to tell her the story of what happened in England. And she looked at me, and she held up her name card, and it said Crowther. I wanted to share that with you. Thank you.
I think that apart from the instances of telepathic or intuitive feelings, yeah, which we afterwards verify turn out to be correct. Okay. Yes. There is proof of interconnectedness even in what we have just done. But except that because it's everyday phenomenon and we talk to people and we understand what they say, it doesn't seem mysterious to us. But if you had two computers, and one computer you found that what you did on one computer came on the other, right? You would say they are interconnected in some way, either electromagnetic or wireless or some connection, right? Now, when she spoke to me, what I heard were words. And how does the meaning get transmitted to my consciousness from hers if there is no interconnection?
That's a very good point. It is our similarity of culture and language and consciousness that somehow moving our mouths and making sounds connects us with understanding.
Karen?
I have experienced many times, if I meet a stranger, you feel that you have known this, even first time you meet, you feel that you have known this man long time back. And I tell this person that in theosophy we say you meet anybody, it's not accident. You must have met him in the past life. That's mean you meet him again. You feel so friendly with him that he is just near to me. That I have experienced myself so many times. And another incident is that sometimes sitting, I'm just thinking of I'm in Kenya, Nairobi. My sons are in England. Sometimes think of it, and I don't know how that my thought goes to there, and I get a phone call from them. This is how it happens. And lastly, our international president, many years back, he said every day at 7:30, everybody must, even for half a minute, 1 minute, let us send a good thoughts for the peace of the world. If everybody does that in different part of the world, there's a continuation of sending the good thoughts throughout the world. Thank you.
Yes, and how many of us have thought of somebody, our brother or sister or children, and all of a sudden the call comes in? It's universal.
We are talking about interconnectedness, but interconnectedness comes from many births. As we believe in reincarnation, we meet here not because it is a conference. We meet here because we've got something to give or something to take from each other. That's one. But I wanted to talk about interconnectedness in a different way, like sports. football. I have never been to Spain. I don't play football. I don't like football. But I was going for Spain, Spain, Spain. That is interconnectedness. When Michael Jackson died a year or something back, my granddaughter, she came to me. She said, "Bah, Michael Jackson is dead." I said, "So?" "But Michael Jackson is dead." So I said, "Do you know him?" "No." I had heard his songs and all. "Do you know his songs?" "No, but Michael Jackson is dead." All of us know how the whole world came together, especially the young ones, to mourn him. A guy who had bad name, who had cases, but all of us came up. That's interconnectedness. Tsunami came. We were all horrified at what happened. All of us did something or the other to help the people who were affected. That is interconnectedness. Let's hope Theosophy brings a tsunami and the whole world gets together with interconnectedness.
Very good.
If this were the United States, we would start to pass a collection plate now. And everybody would say amen.
And that is so true. Our world has become, it's a blessing and a curse, but our world has become so close through the internet now that we are totally interconnected, and something that happens anywhere in the world is instantaneously known everywhere else, not by supernatural means, but just through the internet. So it's quite amazing. Yes, Eddie.
One of the points we talked about was the balance between the need to relate to the community, but also the need to retreat within oneself. One of the sayings is that the whole is always greater than the sum of the parts. But yet, if you look around, it is the individual who has raised himself above the society that has accomplished anything. There is, I think, a misunderstanding that the Theosophical Society or any society can accomplish what the individual cannot do on his own. The Fifth Symphony of Beethoven was not written by a group. The Secret Doctrine was not written by a group. Newton's laws didn't come by a group. It is the individual who raised himself and broke through the paradigm and thereby lifted the whole of society as a result. So I think we need to think of this balance between the individual raising himself above the common herd, if I may put it that way, and thereby lifting the common lot with him.
That's a very good point, and that's another theosophical concept, is that each one of us is responsible for lifting ourselves to whatever degree we can, because thereby lifting the whole. And of course, an example of that kind of thing is, and it happens very frequently, somebody in the United States, China, and Russia will all invent something at the very same time, because it's this universal thought form. They have raised themselves to that particular mental level and then connected in some unusual way. Yes.
Can I ask a question to Eddie?
Yeah.
Yes? Would you say that the herd does not contribute at all to the rising of this individual? It's true that he rises above the herd, but like Newton certainly benefited from a lot of other scientists who did work before him.
Eddie, do you
This
care to
is-
take that on?
When I use the word herd, I don't mean that in a pejorative sense, but the herd must and inevitably helps and contributes the individual to rise above the common denominator and become the highest common factor.
And yet, anyone who has accomplished anything great realizes that they are working on the shoulders of those who have gone before. Yes, yes. So it's always both and.
Well, we have a healing group in Wheaton that comes together, and the healing list of people, and we gather, and we do affect the person, and it doesn't matter the distance. It could be in another state, could be anywhere, but the energy does interconnect, and we all take part, and that is a blessing.
Okay, yes, I participate in that healing group in Wheaton, and actually I call it my Wednesday night prayer meeting because we do it on Wednesday, and somehow I hate to miss it because I don't know if the people who we're sending thoughts to are helped, to what degree they're helped, but it surely does help me to bring my consciousness focused in that way for other people. So, and we do hear reports from time to time that people have really felt uplifted. And I can speak also from experience when I was very, very ill, and again, very sensitive. When people were praying for me, I definitely felt buoyed up by some kind of psychic energy. And I know that that's the efficaciousness of prayers for other people, healing prayers. So very important. Okay, any other comments? One more. Wait a minute.
The scientist in me says that you must correct for the placebo effect before you can be sure that you have effected healing.
Aha. That they think there's a placebo effect, although they have done research to indicate otherwise. She had a comment.
Sorry for my English. There's a question that comes to my mind. If this interconnectedness can be very, very good and useful for humanity and for all the world, like with healing groups and for the goodness of humanity, isn't it possible that it can affect in a negative way, so that is the opposite? This is plus.
Yes,
this is my
yes.
If I have bad thoughts about you, and you about me, and we could become a group, and so on. So we have been talking of very nice and clean and light things and emotions and feeling, and but is it possible that it is the heaviest and darker, heavier, and so on the opposite side of all this? Okay, this is the question.
Yes, absolutely. You know, this is what we're facing in our world with terrorism. And it seems to spread with one angry person to another. So that's something that we have to try to balance and recognize that we are responsible for what our thoughts are, what we're contributing to the whole. And you know, that's the only thing we can change is ourselves, really. and work to change in our relationship to others. And in so doing, raise that interconnectedness in a positive way. But you're right, it is a reality which can be used in either direction. But we are in this soup together, so let's have a good soup rather than a bad soup.
One of the things that I think Theosophy certainly could do in this idea of interconnectedness is that we all live in communities. And one of the primary driving forces in most communities is some form of religion. And in each of our communities, we are saddled or we are burdened by the fact that many of those religious expressions express themselves as I am the only way. And if you don't believe my way, you can take the highway. And if I am a Christian, I'm going to say you're going straight to hell. If I am something else, you might be going some other place. One of the things that I think that we in Theosophy certainly could do is to express to that community in which we live that every religion is important to the holder, but we all share a single point of contact with that ground of being. You might call her God. I don't care what you call that force that's within you. You do have the opportunity to show others what Theosophy, one of the strongest things that Theosophy brings to the table, and that is the concept of togetherness and a lack of the idea that it's my way or the highway.
We have one other comment that was right over here somewhere. Yeah.
I wanted to answer the lady. The thing is that negativeness is there, but what we have to fight to solve this thing is that we have to be conscious that we act and react to one another, and that the division between us are part of the great illusion, we call it. And thinking about ourselves as one unique thing helps us to interconnect each other. This is the great struggle, I think. Even the thing that we were talking yesterday about forgiveness, the solution is discovering our inner self. If we see the other person as a part of ourselves, it could be easy to solve these problems. For example, yesterday I thought, okay, we're talking about forgiveness, and we confuse a little bit what forgiveness is. It's like, for some people, it was like giving up. But even the rebellion that could scare us is a part of ourselves, and we have to care for it. There are many kind of rebellions, but the rebellion that we have to think is the wise one. They were saying yesterday it's right to forgive for the wife who was beaten up every day by the husband is not right, but she has to react in a wise way. And that wise way is driven by unity between us. And we are a lot of way of rebellion. The wise rebellion is a normal and natural thing. The wrong kind of rebellion is terrorism, for example. But we focus on the right one. We focus on Mahatma Gandhi, for example. He succeeded in rebelling, but in an higher sense.
That is a very good addition to our conversation, and Martin Luther King Jr. also did in the United States. He had to bring about that rebellion, and he met a lot of contradictory force, and yet he kept his peacefulness about him in doing that rebellion. Very good contribution. Yeah.
That, the negative and the positive, but there's no greater power than love. So the positive has more power than the negative. So that's a wonderful thing to remember. So the more we love, it knocks out the negative very quickly. So that's what I was
Yeah.
I love people who talk with their hands.
Absolutely, and one of the metaphysical principles that we have to remember is that the negative emotions and heavier emotions actually are a heavier substance and don't travel as far and as fast. And you might say that the love emotions are more on the rocket ship and go much further and faster, and so we can overpower it in time as we work with it. Jan Yeli, and then I believe that will be all we have time for.
The connection between forgiveness and interconnectedness. Yesterday, a statement was made, who forgives? And it is the one who thinks in terms of sin and guilt, was my conclusion then, my remark. And now, when my neighbor made the observation, I thought somewhere in, I think, the writings of HPB, it is, or in the master's writings, it is said the greatest sin is the feeling, to cultivate the feeling of separateness. So as long as you cultivate the feeling of separateness, you live in the idea of sin, and you have to forgive. But when you do not live in separateness, you don't have to forgive.
The next time you all see me, I too will have a gray beard. I want people to listen to me.
Okay. Okay, we'll go ahead with those, and we'll take them quickly. 2 quick little comments.
I met Frederick just now, and he's doing a very noble work, which I didn't know. He is connecting my country, Uganda, with Sweden. He is doing a very, very noble work, what he was saying to me now, that the families in Sweden are connected with the families in Uganda, the people who are suffering and all that, And these Swedish people, are giving money to the people in Uganda to build up their families. So that's the interconnectedness, and that is coming, and I only came to know about that, It's a great work he's doing, right? And now we are also interconnected, we know each other.
That is a wonderful
Dolores,
comment.
you want to have a last word?
Usually in all the congresses, a last word is being issued as an information of the decision taken. It doesn't happen this in the Theosophical Society. But talking with my colleague Abraham Aron, he is a presidential agent of the society in Israel, I share with him my worries because you know the problem between Jews and Palestine. And I am very much connected with the Jewish community in Uruguay, so I suffer with them. So we arrived, the two of us only, with no commission. Because you know, Krishnamurti said, when you start studying a problem, the first thing you usually Westerns do is to start a committee. So we didn't start any committee at all, and we decided that perhaps the Theosophical Society in Israel, with all their members, would start an approach trying to get in contact with Palestine people to help them, I mean, on both sides, to discover what a silly thing is to go on fighting together. There is no other place to go. We cannot push the Palestinians. Where shall we push them? They have to live in the same boat, and in this case, very near, one to the other. So this is one of the things that I may call an outcome of this Congress. I am going to start working with Mr. Oron through this Jewish community in my country, Uruguay, where I now reside, and we will try to see if there is some way to convince them that it is very silly. It's not human at all, but nobody likes to be called a silly person. So we are trying to go that way. It's very silly to go on fighting. There is no need. There should be an understanding among Palestine people and Jewish people.
Thank you.
Do you want a last word on that?
Last words should be last words.
Yes. I think this is excellent that we have moved from going to just personal relationships, how we see each other as being connected with one another. And as that moves, then we thought about how our interactions can be affecting nationally and internationally on the political scene, and how there can be negative things, and then to see these extremely positive international beginnings that are being formulated here. And I think that's a beautiful way of seeing really the pattern of interconnectedness and how it can be in a positive way, and how all of us can lift humanity as we think in these terms. I'm going to call our session to an end. Our time is getting late, and I think that's just a beautiful way to end it. I have two papers that I will share with you. Somebody asked me about the references. CW means collected writings. You might recognize this from Vic Hao Chen's version of the chronological Mahatma letters. And no, not the Vic Hao Chen's disc on Theosophical Classics that is really so good to do research by. These references are all from the collected writings, and the one I gave yesterday also included one from the Janara Jadasa's letters from the Masters of Wisdom, in case you do not recognize it. So, yeah, I'm going to just leave these on the chair, and you can get them if you want, and then I'm going to close us with a Buddhist meditation that it's modified to fit our needs, but I think it's a very appropriate one. So if you would just get in a comfortable position and center yourself. And let these thoughts wash over you as I read them. Our gathering is now ending. Our lives are slightly shorter. Let us look carefully at how we have acted. Brothers and sisters, with all our hearts, let us diligently engage in our practice, whatever it may be. Let us live deeply as free people. Always aware of impermanence and interconnectedness. So that life does not drift away meaninglessly, but moves from meaning into meaning. May each of us follow our Dharma of true brotherhood. Thank you. And I have a copy of this little benediction, and I have a copy of references from the collected writings, if you would like them. On the chairs.